Hi, and welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy. The goal of this podcast is to demystify therapy, what can happen in therapy, and the wide array of conversations you can have in and about therapy. Through personal experiences, guests will talk about therapy, their experiences with it, and how psychology and therapy are present in many places in their lives. With lots of authenticity and a touch of humor, here is your host, Steve Bisson.
Thank you and welcome to episode 101 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. I hope you enjoyed the 100 episode week. Go back and listen to all 5. Listen to the ones that you may have missed. Just an awesome time. But I wanted to talk in episode 101 about something that really doesn't come up too often for a whole lot of people. But last week, and obviously I've been recording this over time, right? I'm going to break a wall here, and I didn't record these Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I record them in different ways over the course of the last month or so. And one of the things I want to talk about is how sometimes having all this energy just really gets you down. And that sounds weird, right? So let me explain. So this was exciting. I love being on my 100th episode. I loved all my guests, go from good friends to my girlfriend to people I've known through the podcast that I was absolutely adore, to where we're at now, which is episode 101. So what is episode 101 other than a down, right? And I don't want to really affect everyone and say, my God, Steve, you're not very uplifting. I don't know if I've ever considered myself as an uplifting type of guy, but I also am a very realistic human being in the sense that sometimes we do get a little tired. We get a little down in regards to different things. And for me, it's been interesting that since I finished recording all these episodes, I've been feeling a little blah about the podcast. And I love my podcast, don't get me wrong. But it's been like, well, what do we do now? We got to 100, then what? And I think that for me, it's one of those things about getting to goals and finishing things. I've explained this to a few of my clients. I've explained this to friends. One of the most disappointing days of my life was the day that I ended up having a full caseload in my private practice. And that sounds weird, right? But it was one of the most down days because then what? That was the goal. And now at 40, I've completed that goal. Then what? I've wanted to have a podcast that's successful. It's not in the higher realms of podcasts, but I think I'm fairly successful. People enjoy it. I get a lot of feedback, get a lot of notes in regards to it. So now I've got to 100 episodes. Now what? And so part of the stuff that I wanted to say is it's okay to not feel great about that. We work on completing goals. That's just human nature, right? We want to finish this. We want to finish that. But I also think that we don't think about the other side. You go on a vacation that you're really much looking forward to. You get to the vacation, the anticipation was much more important than actual vacation, right? Or the destination you were going to, whatever that case may be. And then after that, it's like, coming back from vacation, I've had those experiences too. Like, oh my God, I wish I was on vacation. And again, this is not an attack on my clients, my podcast, or anything else. It's just that kind of down on the other side. And I wanted to normalize that for everyone and realize that it happens to a whole lot of people. I would say that I've never asked all my guests, but my guess, no pun intended, is that most of them have that. And how do we get to the other side? Because I know that that's what's going to be your next question, right? Well, the first thing is to sometimes realize that this is part of goal 1 of 2. So I go for vacation, for example. Let's say you go to vacation in Australia. Well, you can go visit one of the provinces, but there's a lot more than one province there. And there's much more than Sydney and Canberra and all that stuff. There's a lot of places to go. So maybe you set up a next goal of going somewhere else in Australia. Maybe you go to a different continent. But ultimately, you can create new goals for yourself. And I think that's key. So for my podcast, I want to continue doing my podcast, don't get me wrong. But part of me joining the PsychCraft Network is I'm getting to know everyone, but I want to point out someone who has been on my show, Lisa Mustard, who has been someone who has been very influential and supportive of me. And she keeps on working on her podcast. She's past 100 episodes. She started another podcast. She does a lot of classes. She's just an amazing person, and she has new goals all the time. And I think that that's what I've got to do with my podcast. It's going to be new goals. What am I going to do? I don't think the format's going to change much. I'm still going to be me. I'm going to still do interviews. I'm going to still spend time talking like I do here. But ultimately, I also know that I want to be able to create new goals with this. And I'm hoping that people really listen to this podcast and tell me what they want, because I don't know, right? So right now I'm staring at a recording of my voice, literally, while I'm doing this. And I think that most people have given me some subjects, but it's also important to have goals. And my goal is to ask you guys, what do you want me to talk about? I've talked about a lot of different things. And even if you said, you know what, I really want you to revisit how to choose a therapist, or I want to revisit trauma, which I've done many times. Ultimately, I will turn to you, my listeners, to give me subjects. And I think that that's part of the goal, is that this podcast, if I just do what I want, which I do most of the time, that's nice. But who's going to listen if it's just me rambling on about my stuff? Having the PsyCraft Network has given me great ideas, and I'm certainly working on those, and they've given me new ideas and new goals. I'm working with a friend of mine on a new goal of mine. And I think that that's where I want to be at. You're going to be able to listen to, if you haven't already, my French podcast, the first time I did it in French. I'm not going to do it as often, but that's a new goal. And so I guess when I want to talk about how it's normal not to feel up after such a great high, and no drug intention here, just saying that it was a great mental high in regards to all this, and feeling a little down after that. I want to normalize that for everyone. But I'm coming back, obviously, for season 9 on until you guys tell me to shut up. And I want to continue bringing subjects that you want, and I want to continue enjoying myself. So I love having guests, which is going to continue happening. But I also hope that you give me some ideas as to what you want me to ramble on. Today is the first time I don't have a note sheet next to me. I don't have, okay, this is what you're going to say about being down on this. So if the episode sounds natural, that's great, because that's what it was. And if you feel like it's a little convoluted or lost, well, it's because I don't have a script per se. It's the first time I've done without script. Figured I'd try that once in a while, see how it goes. New goals, I guess. But episode 102 will be with 2 firefighters. One of them is someone who has been on here before, who is Eric Knox. And then I have a brand new firefighter that I met through a friend of mine, Jay. You've heard of Jay before on this podcast many times. His name is Brian Harkins. I hope you join me then.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States.